Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Inciting Incident, where we explore that moment that changes everything. I'm very excited about today's guest, Dr. Tara Deliberto, PhD. The doctor is in the house, is a transpersonal clinical psychologist, speaker, author, and retreat leader with a deep commitment to spiritual exploration and the expansion of consciousness. She is a former faculty member of Cornell University's Medical College and is widely recognized for her pioneering work in the field of eating disorders. Her treatment approach, published with New Harbinger in 2019, was recently translated into Espanol. That's Spanish, in case you didn't catch that. So, extending her global impact. Earlier in her career, Dr. Deliberto conducted influential research on suicide and self-injury at Harvard University, work that remains widely cited in academic literature. Beyond her professional practice as a psychologist, her personal focus lies in developing practical methods for transcending the ego in order to foster spiritual growth and heightened awareness. Her upcoming book, The Three-Step Method to Raising Consciousness, a modern spiritual method for transcending the modern ego, will be released next year, offering a contemporary guide to spiritual development. Now, beyond that, I just want to say that Tara is a hell of a person. We connected about 2 years ago through our mutual friend, Dr. Hillary Hamilton. We were chatting about literary agents and all that stuff. And then this July 4th, we both happened to be on Coronado Island. So we really connected there. And then she's just kind of come into my life like a hurricane, a good hurricane. And I just want to say you are a natural born leader and organizer. And she is, if you've heard the other podcasts, she's the creator of the Consciousness Club, which is kind of a nerd club that meets together every Thursday on Zoom. And we talk about all things consciousness, disclosure, etc. So anyway, Tara, welcome. How are you today?
Oh, Tim, thanks so much for having me. What an introduction. Thank you. And it is an honor to be here. You're one of my favorite dudes, and I love the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I woke up this morning and I just felt so good. And in my meditation, I was like, what is this feeling? And I called it gratitude. It's this profound gratitude that where you are connected to your higher self and everything else. And then something amazing happened, which I told you offline, too early to discuss that, but let's get right into it. I want to ask you, when was the moment where you realized things had to change?
We're just going to go for it, huh, Tim?
Let's get
We're
in
going
there.
right in.
Let's get
Okay,
in
let's
there.
do it. Let's do it. So you mentioned I was on faculty at Cornell University's medical school, and I'm a clinical psychologist. And having been in that position as a clinical psychologist, you would think that maybe I would know a thing or two about inner peace, happiness, et cetera. But I was absolutely miserable, really disconnected, really not in gratitude. Whatever the opposite of gratitude is what I was when I was at Cornell. I want to be able to think of something clever on the spot, but it's a little early in the morning for me, but I'll loop back around to it. But I really was in a bad place. And my grandmother had just passed, a person who I was very, very, very connected to. And I felt that she was really the one person on the planet who I could feel at home with, and in my, we'll say, soft feminine energy. And so when she passed, I was just like an unmoored boat out to sea, and was feeling, this misery. And the person I was dating at the time, about a week into my grandmother's passing, said, can't you just get over it? Why are you moping around? And I
Clearly
thought,
that
wow,
person has never experienced loss or
clearly.
grief. Yeah.
Yeah, which is absolutely the case. And so I thought, all right, well, not only has my grandmother passed, but this person that I'm living with doesn't really seem to care. So what am I going to do? So I slept on the couch that night, and I woke up around 6, and I was in New York City at the time. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go shopping, at 6 a.m. So I go to Soho, and I'm thinking a little retail therapy is somehow going to, fill the void in my heart that my past grandmother and my inconsiderate boyfriend had left. And I'm walking around Soho at this point, it must have been, 6:45 in the morning, and no shops are open. And I thought, what am I doing here? This is so stupid. It's just this real moment of clarity. So I went to a Starbucks and I got out my phone and I started looking up support groups for grief. And there weren't any, but there were Al-Anon groups. And for those of you who don't know, Al-Anon is an AA type organization, a 12-step program for people who are loved ones of those with alcoholism. And I thought, okay, well, I fit that description, so I'm going to go to an Al-Anon meeting. So I went. There was one on the Upper East Side it was something like 7:30 in the morning. So I took the train up and I got there. And I'm like, okay, I'm really going to work on myself. And this guy, I was thinking about leaving this part of the story out, but it seems relevant. So
Get to it.
I'm just going to say this guy was just staring at me in the group and wasn't blinking. And I thought, well, this is creepy. I can't be here. So right in the group, I looked up other groups that I could go to, because I thought I'm not going to give up here because this one person is looking at me. Like, if I really want to get support and feel connection, I can't just give up immediately. So I found this women's group back downtown. So I got on a train. I went back downtown.
It was a busy morning before at 8 a.m.
Yeah, I know. I was all over the place. I mean, I was in at least 2 boroughs, all over Manhattan. So I went back downtown, and I found this women's group that really changed my life. And so I guess maybe we can pause there, but that was really the beginning of my spiritual journey.
Well, I mean, why pause? Keep going. Press the play button.
All right. Yeah. We're from the Northeast. You're from New Jersey. I'm from New York. We could just keep going. Right. And this is a podcast.
We're jibber jabbering. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go. All right. So I'm in this women's meeting, and I just start, hysterically crying, just crying. And at this point, I'm a therapist. I work in New York City. I'm not used to being the one crying in a support group. I'm used to being the one at the front of the room, helping everybody else through it. So this was really something different for me and really needed. And I wasn't just a little bit crying. I mean, I was full on snot coming out of the nose, like real deal breaking down.
Wow.
And yeah, it was intense. And again, very unlike me to have this display of emotion like this in public. And so this very kind woman sitting next to me got up, went to the bathroom, brought back a roll of toilet paper, and was just kind of feeding me this toilet paper to blow my nose with continually throughout this meeting. And there was something in that nonverbal act of kindness. She wasn't asking me what I needed. She wasn't trying to stop me from crying. She just took control of the situation. I don't know her name. I don't know who she is. We never even spoke after it. But the act of kindness
and compassion
that she displayed really blew me away. And I thought, okay, this is what I need in my life. I need to be giving this, and I need to be receiving it. And that was something really new for me. And so that began my interest in community, which is not anything that I had been interested in before, because I wasn't yet spiritual. I was atheist at this point still.
I was just about to say, it's probably important to note that you were an atheist. You were this academic. This is the way it is. This is the program. This is how we do it.
Yeah, and alone. And it's very dog eat dog and competitive, and you have to publish or perish. And there's that kind of mentality. And so I had some friends in my field, but there wasn't really a sense of community. And I'm an only child, and I don't know. I wasn't necessarily a loner, but I wasn't a leader. I wasn't a community organizer. Nothing like that. I never played on a sports team. I used to be a ballet dancer.
Talk about a pendulum swing to where you are today.
And it's so funny because so few people know me like that. But you're one. Well, I think there's maybe a growing number, but you're one of the people that know me as this community organizer behind the scenes. It's not really a public thing, this consciousness club. It's kind of like a group of our friends that sit around and talk about wild things every Thursday. And so it's kind of growing into a bit of a movement. But yeah, at that time, I really was very alone. And I liked going to the Al-Anon meetings because there were some of the same people that showed up. You got to know them over time. Again, there was a sense of community. And finally, I got to the point where I said to myself, well, all of these people were saying that they used to be atheist or they didn't understand God or know God. And maybe that's why I'm miserable. Maybe community is just the beginning of connection.
Beautiful.
And yeah, it was beautiful. It is beautiful. And so I really thought to myself, I need to give this a shot. I'm a clinical psychologist who knows all of these different schools of treatment, and I've applied them to myself, and I've been able to learn how to catch my thoughts, sit quietly, be mindful, face my emotions head on, regulate my emotions. I learned all the basic tools and techniques, but I hadn't yet really gone into using them, putting them to use. I was digging myself out of a hole. I was playing defense against my negative thoughts and my aversive emotions. I hadn't yet thought, okay, now I have the tools. What am I going to do with them? How am I going to go? What am I going to really make of myself and my life? But that moment where I realized that spirituality was the only thing that I had up until that point been closed to, I thought, okay, I need to open this door.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this little cabin in the woods in Connecticut at the time. So I go up to the cabin in the woods, and I really fully committed to asking for a sign. You know, if God is real, let me know. I want to know. I want to know beyond a shadow of a doubt. I want to know beyond that. I want to know with 100% certainty that God is real. And if I can really experience it, then I'll be in, and I will serve, and I will do whatever I can to help humanity. So a couple weeks later, I should really look into the exact dates of all of this, because I keep pretty good records in my journals and things like that. But I think it was a couple weeks later, I'm back in Brooklyn, and I'm thinking to myself, forgiveness is really it. Like that's what I need to do.
Who did you have to forgive?
Who? That's a good question. Listen, Tim, I'm just coming out of the closet here in terms of speak publicly, and you come out with a question like who? I'll say this, a family member.
Okay.
I'll say a family member.
We can leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
But,
that'll be our next podcast.
Our next podcast. Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking, okay, I really need to forgive this family member. I'm holding on to this victimhood, and that knowingness that was the thing I needed to do, was very new. And it came to me very clearly and very suddenly. And I felt at the time, okay, this is connected to me asking for a sign. So I went into this meditation. Now, prior to this, I had only meditated for short periods. I wouldn't even call it meditation. I would say that I had a mindfulness practice where I would sit and I would count my breaths and I would step into the witness seat and notice what was happening in my mind and in my body and in my emotional state. And for whatever reason, I thought, okay, I'm going to do a 2-hour meditation. I'm going to get all my needs met beforehand. I'm going to make myself really comfortable and I'm going to go very, very deep. And I'm actually going to do something while I'm sitting in the silence rather than count my breath. I am going to experience myself through the mind of my family member and see what their experience. Yeah. I don't know where this is coming from, but it is very clear that this is what I need to be doing. So I go into this meditative state and I light all the candles. I get this, everything set up, good set and setting, no drugs, just complete. I think it's important to mention, not that I'm anti using psychedelics. In fact, quite the opposite. I think that psychedelics can be very, very useful for these transcendental experiences with the right set and setting and therapist, et cetera, as long as it's regulated, legal, and all of the rest. But I happen to not have been using any sort of psychedelics, and I hadn't ever. So I go into this meditation and I experience myself through the eyes of this family member. And I see that just me existing as a person was difficult for this family member. And I started to understand all of the reasons why this person had for treating me the way that they did. And I really, truly, fully, and completely forgave this person because I understood experientially what it was like. And so I get out of this meditation and it's about 2 hours later and I'm sitting on the bed talking to my boyfriend at the time, saying that I feel so much lighter and better. And all of a sudden my consciousness disconnected from my body and it was in 360 degree light. I mean, just light coming from everywhere. And the reason why it's important to really mention that it was 360 degrees is because I wasn't seeing through my eyes. Right now I have a 180 degree view, but I had 360 degree perception in every direction of this light. And it was vibrating at a very, very high frequency. It was very, very intense. And it was very difficult for my consciousness to sustain being in that state. And so I didn't know what was happening. I felt scared to some extent. I mean, not real. Scared is such a kind of like a human term, and I didn't feel quite human in that state. But I had consciousness and I had awareness, and I knew that this wasn't normal. We'll say.
Well, you were in like a pure state of light.
Pure state of light.
There really isn't any language for it yet.
No, there's not. There's not. It was pure experience. I wasn't thinking in words. And in fact, when I've come back from these states, I have difficulty with what I call wording. It's like I can't word for a period of time because I'm in the experience. It's very difficult. But anyhow, in that moment, right, I wasn't wording. I wasn't scared. I just had awareness that this was not my quote normal state. And I was somewhere else and I didn't know what was happening. And so that very first time this happened to me, I directed my consciousness to go back into my body. And so I asked my boyfriend at the time, hey, did I pass out or how much time had elapsed? And he just kind of looked at me and said, what are you talking about? You were just telling me about your meditation and then asked if you passed out. And I was like, oh, okay. So no time at all had passed here in what I refer now to as the third dimension, as opposed to whatever dimension that was. And I kind of wrote it off. I thought, all right, well, that was weird. Maybe my brain was glitching. that kind of a thing. And I kind of went to sleep. And the next day I woke up and I felt much lighter, and I felt much more intuitive and connected and happy and literally light. I felt lighter. And I'm understanding now that that might not be a figure of speech, feeling lighter. I think it's actually potentially a phenomena. And certainly seeing the light is not just a figure of speech. Seeing the light is a literal phenomena. I know because I experienced it, and I didn't just experience it that one time. I've experienced it multiple times.
I've had that experience. It was like instantaneous. It was like this energy shot. I was like moping around Seattle for a year with a broken heart. And I remember it was the first time I listened to In Rainbows by Radiohead. And I was walking along Finney Ridge, and I was going to a wedding in Costa Rica. And I was like, I can't bring this energy down there. What do I do? And there was like this voice that said, I know, I just let go. And it was like, boom, it was like shot out of my heart. And I stutter stepped and almost fell back. And I looked around, I'm like, holy shit, did anybody just see that? What the hell just happened? And it was instantaneous. I never thought about that girl again. I totally forgot about that. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a good example that this is possible, what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. That immediate change can happen. It can happen. And it really is in some ways as simple as letting go, but you really need to commit to it. It's not just letting go with conditions. Like, oh, I'll let go if they say they're sorry, or if they apologize, or when they die. No, it's letting go unconditionally. And when you let go unconditionally, that's when those stage shifts happen.
Yeah. I want to make one observation here is that you had this huge body of knowledge. It wasn't wisdom, it was knowledge. So it wasn't embodied. And then the moment you embodied it, there was this shift, because knowledge, if it's not embodied, is kind of useless. It's just intellectual mumbo jumbo. And I also think it's important to say that you were sick before this, right? You were sick for a long time?
That's right. I was really sick. That's something else that shifted. So prior to having this, what I call paradigm shift, really, I called it a state shift earlier, but it really is a paradigm shift from conditional living to unconditional living. I was very ill. I had some sort of autoimmune disease. We don't really quite know exactly what it was. It was a collection of diseases, potentially. But I had something like 38 precancerous polyps removed from my body. I couldn't travel. I was in bed all of the time. I was in pain. I was inflamed quite literally from head to toe. I was really sick. And following this experience, I started having people, healers, not doctors necessarily, although some of them were doctors, but healers come into my life and guide me with what to eat, what to do, what herbs to take, and also what meditation practices to do. And then I had, in some ways, a gradual shift, and then in other ways, a sudden shift. So our mutual friend, Dr. Hillary Hamilton, she worked for many years in Palm Springs with a man named Dr. Lawrence Freitas, who is, who
I didn't know that was the connection.
That's the connection. Yeah. So Dr. Freitas and I met at a social event, and I thought, this man is brilliant. He went to Brown undergrad, but that's not what makes somebody brilliant. He just so happened to have gone to Brown undergrad, and he was what is called a naturopathic doctor. This is not homeopathic. It's not allopathic. Naturopathic medicine is, and I'm probably not going to get all of this quite right, but essentially is a discipline that combines Western and Eastern medicine. So he can prescribe Western medicine, antibiotics, etc. He can also and does also understand how various herbs, vitamins, teas, practices, ancient practices combined together with Western medicine can not just alleviate symptoms, but cure. Yeah. Actually cure the underlying illness.
He's taking a holistic approach as opposed to allopathic, where you're just treating the symptom, but you're never really getting to the root cause.
Yeah, he's absolutely taking a holistic approach. And people say they take a holistic approach, but they might not wholly know all of the various tools. This guy, he knows. He knows all of the tools and he uses all of them. And so he started shifting my gut microbiome. And that was one big major shift for me that helped heal. But the other immediate practice that shifted my lung condition, which was pretty serious, from being debilitating to completely gone in an instant, was Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations. And I had never gone to a retreat. I only met him once very briefly in person for about 30 seconds. So I don't really know what the whole community is really about. I have yet to experience it. I'm excited to. But I went down to the beach after listening to one of his meditations. And I thought to myself, Tim, I was like, I am so sick and I am so afraid to let myself believe that I could be better. But I've literally seen the light. I mean, I asked for a sign from God. I asked to experience the knowingness that the physical 3D reality is not all there is. I got it. Right. So after you come back from something like that, you're like, well, I mean, what else can I ask for? What's the limit here? Right. Like, how far can I take this thing? And I thought, well, I have this lung condition and I really want to travel and I want to be there for my son and I want to be alive and well. And I can't really be a good mom. I can't really be a good therapist. I can't really be a good contributor if I'm sick. And I feel very scared that I will go into this meditation and ask to be healed and I won't be. But what's the worst that could happen? I go into this meditation, I get my hopes up, and then I'm just sick again. Okay, well, I've already been sick for 20 years. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, the worst that can happen is that everything is exactly the same. And I know how to at least cope with that. I don't like it. I don't want this to be reality, but I at least have that as a known variable, what it's like to be this sick. So I went into the meditation and I thought, okay, I really need to let go. No conditions, no fear, just go for it. And I imagined a life where after that meditation, I could just be free. I could walk around people smoking cigars and cigarettes and not be in pain, which prior to that, I would have been in pain for about a week after just a secondhand smoke exposure. It's horrible. Living in New York City, impossible. That's why I got the cabin in the woods, actually, because I couldn't physically be in the city any longer. So COVID, this was during COVID too. And I thought, okay, I have a serious lung condition where I can't live in a city. I can't be around secondhand smoke. My doctor is saying that I'd be one of the people at risk for being really sick, maybe dying from COVID. And so I need to make a shift. So I'm going to go all in. And I went all in. I just envisioned this new future. And I got out of that meditation and I thought, okay, like I didn't know if I was better or not because I didn't really test it. I felt better. I felt good. I felt excited and I was celebrating having been healed, even though I didn't really know, but I went into the ocean in this like celebratory swim and got out and was excited. And then the next day I was going to the supermarket and I'm walking in and somebody's smoking a cigar and I didn't feel anything.
Wow.
I thought, okay.
Something's happening.
Something's happening. And then so what would have been really dramatic and fun is if I would have bought a pack of cigarettes and tried to smoke them, but I didn't. What I
Probably a good call.
Yeah, right.
Baby steps.
Yeah, right. And so I went back out though onto the street and I hung out there and people were secondhand smoking and I was fine. And I was like, I think this is healed. And so I wanted to go further into the celebration of it because when you celebrate for whatever reason, it somehow creates that reality that I don't exactly understand the mechanism of it. All I know is that I one day had a lung condition. I meditated and the next day I didn't have a lung condition anymore. And I feel like it's scary to talk about these things in some ways publicly. But what I know is that happened to me, and people can say whatever they want about it, but I can sit here and smoke a pack of cigarettes. And again, not that I would want to, but that wouldn't be something that my medical records would indicate that I would have been able to do prior to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tara and I were just at TCCHE or something, the Conference for Consciousness and Human Potential, I think it is, this weekend in San Diego. And what is it? Did I get it right?
So close. The Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution.
Evolution. Okay. That explains the E at the end. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm like, where's the E come from? So we were at this conference together this weekend, and Dr. Bruce Lipton was talking. And Dr. Bruce Lipton is sort of the father of epigenetics. And epi means above. We all know what genetics are. And we used to think that genetics ruled the roost. But epi is above. And what's above our genetics? The mind. The mind controls everything. So you had this mind shift, and then you had this profound physical shift. And then it's like a circle. The physical changed your chemistry changed your thinking. Boom, you're healing, and you're the modern Dr. Tara now.
That's right. That's right. And anyone who knew me 7 or 8 years ago would be laughing at me now because I was so materialistic and so materialist. And all of my friends who believed in God just thought I was the worst, because I was one of these like militant atheists.
The worst kind.
The worst. I was the worst.
No neuroplasticity.
None. And then the folks that were my friends who were militant atheists just think I'm like off the reservation. They think I'm crazy, but they see me traveling and being able to be around cigarette smoke and all of the rest. So I don't think that they quite can assimilate all that's happened, but it's quite funny what's happened socially behind the scenes for me over here with this shift. But I know that I was in the light. I know what happened when I came back. I know that I had Dr. Lawrence's help healing my gut. And I know that meditation instantaneously cured my lung condition.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the role Alan Steinfeld played, who is going to be on this podcast. He's a trip. But first, I want to ask you, now that you're where you are, can you see all these spiritual breadcrumbs lining up to get you on this path? Because I feel like everybody I've talked to who's been on kind of this journey, there was this guiding, including Dr. Hamel Patel, who runs Joe's research. There have been all of these breadcrumbs along the way, and I say in my new work, it's like breadcrumbs don't mean anything when they're on their own, but they leap out of your awareness with such a registering force that you're like, that was weird. And then they start stacking upon each other. And this becomes this guiding system, this GPS, spiritual guidance system from kind of beyond time and space.
All right. I have a potentially different answer to this than your other guests. I don't know. We'll see. You tell me.
Bring it.
But when I was in the 3D paradigm, when I was atheist, when I didn't have anything but my anxiety guiding me and my fear of not being good enough guiding me and conditions for everything in my life, I'd be good enough so long as I was a faculty member at Cornell. I'd be good enough so long as I got married and had kids. I had all these conditions. I could forgive someone as long as they apologized first.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
In that matrix of fear-based conditions, nothing synchronistic happened. Nothing. I had no breadcrumbs. I was out alone in the world.
That's beautiful and profound.
Yeah. Yes. Because now everything happens as if by magic. People come into my life, community builds, people get healed. We are all helping one another behind the scenes. There's this beautiful community emerging. There are people doing amazing things with their work, helping humanity in this beautiful way. I mean, my life is pure magic right now.
I can attest
And
to that.
yeah, yeah, it really is. It is pure magic. And it was not before. It really, really was dark. And I had paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift came when I dropped all of the conditions. That's what it was. Letting go of what? Letting go of the conditions for your happiness, the conditions for your growth, the conditions for loving yourself, not in the egoic way, in the real way, in the real sense. I experienced being love and light. Those are not expressions. We are quite literally love and light. But if we have conditions, we do not experience the love and light because love is unconditional.
You're creating separation.
You're creating separation. So this is what I realized going back to that experience where I essentially merged consciousness with someone who I felt had victimized me.
Wow.
What I realized in that moment was that our biggest blocks for connection are where we feel that we have been hurt because we are trying to protect ourselves, right? So at that point, I had developed all the skills. I know how to handle myself. You know, I'm a tough Italian New York broad.
Yeah, you are.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm fine. I can handle myself. I had processed my trauma. I started having community and I was ready to face my abuser, we'll say, in my consciousness. But prior to that, I don't think I was ready. And I'm not necessarily saying that everybody is willing and able to forgive at every moment, although we probably are. But speaking from personal experience, I had to process the trauma first and equip myself with skills to protect myself. And then once I felt like, okay, I can handle myself in any situation, then I was like, well, I'm going to go for it. I feel like I'm strong enough at this point after, you know, however many years of therapy and learning skills and being a therapist to see what this person saw when they saw me. And by merging consciousness in that way, I believe what I did in that moment was repair a tear in the fabric of the collective consciousness.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And by plugging myself in where I felt the most separate, unconditional love.
Connection happened.
I love the person who abused me. I felt pure love and understanding and oneness. I think that what happened was my consciousness entered the unified field of consciousness, as quantum physicists would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the entry point to the unified field for me is where I was most ununified. So boom, forgiveness, unified. And now I think I understand a little bit. I'm beginning to understand a little bit of what Jesus was talking about and what all the mystic saints and sages across the world, across time, across religions, across regions have been talking about.
When you were saying that and you were talking about, I mean, I just had this, you know, about the field, like this hole in the field or this blanket or something, and you created a stitch in it and you created more wholeness in the collective consciousness. And I think that's what everybody has to do through the process of healing themselves. You can't heal others or serve the world. I mean, you were a prime example. You're trying to heal other people and you're the one who's, you know, destroyed. Miserable. And then you make this change. And now you're helping people at just a greater and greater scale. And I'm excited to see where this new path takes you, because I feel like you're right on the cusp of all sorts of beautiful things. And when I was really young, I, you know, probably 17, 20s, like I was trying to figure out the meaning of life. And it was driving me absolutely fucking crazy to the point of like thinking about not being here, like checking out when I was like 22. And, you know, as you get older, you know, and you acquire this body of knowledge, I realized that, you know what, I don't have to figure out what the meaning of life is. I just have to be a participant and a co-creator. And when you move into that energy, I said in this new work, it's like you become like the boring machine, and matter conforms to your will. The boring machine is like what carves your tunnel. So when you're in alignment with your mind, body, and spirit through right action, right thoughts, right feeling, and right language, you become this force, and matter conforms to your will. And then you just have to, like you said, allow and receive.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the really interesting thing, Tim. I had been exposed to Buddhism. I grew up Catholic. I had exposure to, morality and right thinking, et cetera. But I didn't really know how to apply it to me. So this is where my work from eating disorders gets bridged into consciousness, which is I figured out treating eating disorders that people with eating disorders had conditional self-love. I can love myself if I am thin. And so they compulsively starve themselves in order to get this approval of themselves that was really a substitute for self-love. There was a misunderstanding that approval is not love. And once I figured out, okay, what we need to do is move the internal compass from thinness, which is outcome oriented, conditional, based in fear, to unconditional, process oriented ideals based in truth and love, then we can move the dial. So with eating disorders, it's lovingly nourishing the body while accepting the way that it looks. I'm no longer trying to be thin because that is conditional. It's based in fear. I'm not good enough. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid if I gain weight, I'll be rejected and abandoned, right? That's the matrix of conditions that keeps someone stuck in the 3D, right? But you get freed when you say to yourself, I don't care. I don't give a shit what my body looks like, but I want it to be healthy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lovingly nourish it because I care about it, not because I'm trying to conform it to something or other, but I'm going to lovingly nourish it and I'm going to accept however it looks. Boom, freedom.
Yeah. I
right?
mean, yeah, go ahead.
Right. And so what I realized was that process can be generalized across different domains.
I was just going to say that. It goes back to some wound in childhood, and then we're trying to make up for that because we're seeking the love that we didn't get.
Yeah. And it could be from a big T trauma, as they say. So some a big abusive thing.
Okay.
Or it could be from all these tiny little traumas that we have from what I call living in the emotionally toxic ecosystem. So our physical environment is filled with toxins. And then if we eat those toxins, we get cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, we're exposed to all of these toxins on social media, et cetera. We're bringing them into our psyches. And then we are telling ourselves that we're not good enough. It's toxic.
What did you call that? Emotionally toxic what?
Ecosystem.
Oh, I love that. That is good.
I wrote about that in my first book.
Awesome. What is the name of that, just since we're right there?
Oh, sure. So the first book that I wrote is a treatment manual for therapists. So it's called Treating Eating Disorders in Adolescence.
Okay.
And that was the one published by New Harbinger, translated into Espanol. Thank you for translating that earlier.
That's
for
Spanish, folks.
Spanish. Thank you. Yes, thank you. And then it also comes with these 400 free pages of handouts for families, therapists, and patients to use. So in those handouts in this book, I talk about how people with eating disorders, they come to be ill, I believe, through getting these messages that their body isn't good enough, either through trauma or big T trauma, sexual abuse, for instance, or through being on social media and being told that their body isn't good enough quite directly. Sometimes, people will say, you look fat, or how could anybody love you, or these horrible abusive things.
Yeah.
Right. And so what happens is people take that on as their operating system in their consciousness. And I thought, okay, we need to wipe the slate clean. We need to dump all of these toxins out and reprogram the mind to these other ideals. I call them higher consciousness ideals. So with, for instance, money, you can have the condition in order to love myself, I need to be a wealthy person. So sometimes people call that a personality, like, oh, this person has a personality, or they need to be a wealthy person, but it's not quite right. What it is, it's a cognitive condition in the mind. And when you have those conditions, you behave a certain way at the expense of other people. You're willing to put other people down in order to feel good for yourself. It's limited. It's not an abundance, right? It's me versus you. It's not unified. It's ununified, right? So over here in the higher consciousness space, it's not about needing to be a wealthy person or else. Let go of that condition. Let it go. Right?
Yeah.
We need money to survive in the world, etc., right? But that's not a condition for self-love. We all know people who are very wealthy who are miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jim Carrey said, I love this. It's one of my favorite Jim Carrey quotes, and I'm probably going to get it just a little wrong. Okay.
He's probably not listening, so don't worry.
Maybe though.
And if he is, hey Jim, I want to have you on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't limit yourself. Maybe he will listen. We'll see. So Jim Carrey says that he wishes that everybody could be rich and famous so they know that it's not the answer.
That is amazing. And I did like a little video for social media yesterday, and I was talking about George Harrison's documentary, Living in the Material World, and Martin Scorsese produced it. Have you seen it?
No, I'm not a big input. I'm more, talk about it now.
This is really amazing. And it's in two parts. And the first part is sort of his childhood, and then the Beatles and reaching the top, and then realizing that it's empty. And the second part is his solo career and his spiritual journey. And, he was deeply involved in all sorts of spiritual traditions and stuff. And, the Buddhists, they basically, what he was preparing for his whole life after he had his awakening was his moment of death. Because like the Buddhists say, like your state of mind when you pass over is, creates kind of another iteration. And his wife, basically, Olivia, said she didn't really go into details, but she was just like, let's just say when he left his body, the room lit up. It's one of my most favorite documentaries. I've probably seen it 4 times. Anybody that wants to watch it, I'll be like, let's watch it again. I'll just sit there for 3.5 hours. And every time I see it, it's like, a new thing in myself opens up, because every time you see it, you have a greater body of life experience to bring to it. But I want to transition here to a year ago at TCCHE, sitting in the claim jumper, and Alan Steinfeld walks past you.
He does. Alan Steinfeld walks past me. I want to get right into that. To loop back for just a moment.
Of course.
Love that. We'll watch that documentary. Want to watch it together next time you're in town.
I'm down.
Let's get a crew together and we can watch it. And also the ideals, just to again close the loop on the wealthy person piece, right? So what you can do instead of trying to be a wealthy person is essentially contribute, right? Create meaningful work for yourself and others, and contribute in the community, which you mentioned before, Tim. It's so beautiful. And so the book that I wrote, which is, we don't know exactly what the title is yet, but I'm thinking something along the lines of the 3-step method to raising consciousness, but more like that, because that's what it is. There are 3 steps to raising your consciousness, letting go of these conditions, which are calling your conditions out, stop trying to prove yourself, and then rewiring the programming of your mind from these egoic ideals to these higher consciousness ideals. Those are the 3 steps. And I'm feeling like the title should be something like Inner Turmoil to Inner Peace. Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? When you're living in these conditions for self-love, it's turmoil, it's misery. When you let go of the inner conditions, boom, inner peace, unconditional love.
I like that. Maybe pick our mutual friend Steve Carlisle's brain. He's pretty good at that.
thinking.
But I think
Yeah.
that's really, I mean, the title is, you know, I had my former book was whatever, a different title, and then landed on the new title, and then everything opened up. But I feel like that's strong because it's straight to the point.
It's straight to the point. This is what you're going to get. I mean, this is what it feels like. You know me. I am peaceful no matter what, like no matter what's going on. There's peace. And I'll tell you one other thing, and then we'll get to Alan
I'm
Steinfeld.
glad I didn't meet the old Tara, by the way. I'm glad I met the new Tara.
You would not have liked her. Yeah, she was like, yeah. She was a lot of fun.
I bet.
You know, if you want to like go out and party and have a good time, sure. But I was a train wreck, man. Wow. And so, you know, it's a different scenario now, you know, 7-8 years later. But what I'll say is I was in this moment, Tim, a few years ago where, without getting into details, my son and I, our lives, will say, were in some degree of danger. And I thought, okay, this could be it for us. And I thought, well, my consciousness has already been in the light. I know that this body is not me. Not only am I not measured in worth by what my body looks like, it literally is not me. This is an avatar. My consciousness is in and around my body. It also, I think, simultaneously exists in another dimension. I don't really know, but it sure seems like it. And so I am okay with dying. I'm okay. I'm okay with it. And I thought, all right, if this is the moment I'm going to die, fine. And I let go. I just fully let go of this life. And I thought, if my son and I die, we're going to be just fine. We're going to be just fine, because this is not who we are. Our bodies are not us. We're consciousness. We're souls. We're going to be okay. And that moment was another bam, like up-leveling moment where my paradigm shifted even further into the spiritual, and things like that. It just, when you really let go, they bring things into such alignment and the magic starts happening. And so that moment where I let go of this body and my son and just fully thought we're going to be okay. And we were, in the 3D, but very shortly after that, I met Alan Steinfeld. And that's
beautiful. Yeah.
that's the stage. Yeah.
Before we get to Alan, I just want to say one of my favorite quotes is by Teilhard de Chardin, who was a French poet, paleontologist, philosopher, and Jesuit who was excommunicated from the Catholic Church, which means, you know, he's probably doing something right. And he said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah, that's the paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Right. You can go from not even thinking you have a soul to, okay, you have a soul, to, no, your soul is really driving everything here in the 3D. And that's certainly where I am. And so I'm sitting in the claim jumper.
A year ago at TCCHE, right?
Yeah, 2 years ago, actually.
Okay.
So January 2023. At TCCHE, which, by the way, I'm now doing a course with on going from inner turmoil to inner peace, breaking your conditions
Amazing.
for self-harm. So that's also like a fun, you know, a full circle. Yeah. So I didn't know anyone at the time, and I'm sitting in this restaurant. There's an empty seat next to me, and this man with long white hair comes running full speed, this older guy, full speed, through the restaurant. And he stops short after he passes me, and he whips around and he looks at me and he sits down in the chair and very casually says, you know, when people have experiences at higher states of consciousness, other beings notice. What happened to you?
Oh my God. That's so amazing. Especially knowing Alan.
Yeah, you've known Alan for years, right?
Quite a long time, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, well, if you're asking me a question like that, I think you already know. And he just launched into it. He said, you know, you were really miserable and you were victimizing yourself, and you decided to let that go. You forgave. and you went into the light. And, and he's going like a million miles a minute at this point. He goes, a lot of people talk about forgiveness, but you really did it. And wow, I haven't even forgiven my mother. And I was like, whoa, it's like, he just knew.
Pump the brakes, fella.
Yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, who are you? And he said, oh, I'm Alan Steinfeld, and we're going to be very good friends.
And now you are.
We are. Yeah. We're super good friends.
Yeah.
And and so that to me speaks to the interconnectedness of consciousness. And Ram Dass spoke about this with Neem Karoli Baba. It's not just it's not just me, it's not just you. There are scientists out there who have been talking about this. And it sounds in some ways like it's okay if it's in the past, right? Like it's okay if Ram Dass talked about it because Ram Dass is a legend and that was Ram Dass's experience. Or it's okay if all of these things with saints and Jesus happened 2,000 years ago, but these things don't happen now. And my message is they happen now. They happen now. They happen to me
with greater frequency, I think, because consciousness is awakening across the planet. And you just have to be open to it.
Right. Because of the work that Buddha did, because of the work that Jesus did, because of the work that all of the saints did. Now, all of their work is coming to fruition and more people are waking up with greater velocity and we're finding each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talk about it in my new work, but it's an information grid once you're tapped into a certain frequency. And this probably all started with Max Planck and the, discovery of quantum physics. That was at the turn of the last century. And here we are now. And quantum physics is proving all of this spirituality. And, Dr. Joe Dispenza always says, science is the new language of mysticism. And he's sort of cracking the code on all of these woo-woo things when actually, oh my God, it's chemistry, it's epigenetics, it's neuroscience, and
psychology. Psychology really needs to enter into the conversation, which is why I feel like this work is really important about the self-love conditions because and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm so excited about this, which is there are so many people talking about psychological mechanisms who are not psychologists, which is fine, right? It's everybody, it's up for everybody. But I think psychologists are really uniquely positioned to understand all of the various tools and techniques and exactly all of the concepts and how they can interplay and how to best use what we know from 100 years of the fields of psychology existing more now, how to apply it to the raising of consciousness or the elevation of the human mind from being caught in a fear matrix into one that's plugged into the collective. Psychologists know how to do that. I'm talking to you psychologists out there, because
you listen, folks.
Yeah. Please do, because we have been trained through a lot of training. I mean, you have 4 years of undergrad. Then I worked for a lab at Harvard for 2 years, which a lot of people do. They do this lab management stuff. Then it's 6 years of a PhD. I did 2 years of a postdoc. It's a lot of education.
It's a lot of programming and conditioning.
Right. And for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So we both get programming, but we also know what the programming's all about and where the technicians of knowing how to undo unhelpful fear-based programming. And I think a lot of people just, they kind of overlook the field of psychology. They don't, unless you've really been to a really good therapist and the kind of power experientially of what a good therapist can help facilitate within you. It's hard to fully grok that field, but psychology really, really, really needs to enter into this space. And there are folks, so at TCCHE, we have Gabor Mate, who's speaking more on trauma and healing. There are amazing psychologists out there, Tara Brach, Sharon Salzberg in the space, so many others. But Ram Dass really was the one who pioneered this, which is super fun because he, by the way, he worked in the same building that I worked in, William James Hall, like right before he left.
Wow.
He was at Harvard in William James Hall. And then I eventually was there. And there are so many other cool psychologists there. Ellen Langer is another really high level psychologist looking at how the mind impacts the body.
Is that transpersonal psychology? What is transpersonal psychology? Is it
Yeah,
like a
so
spiritual bend?
spiritual bent. Yeah.
Okay.
So this transpersonal psychology was not in vogue when I was coming up and getting my PhD. Behavioral science really was, which is great because it's super mechanistic and specific. But transpersonal psychology really was like the Ram Dassian psychology, people kind of trying to get beyond ego into that spiritual space. So I think that behavioral psychology and cognitive psychology and what are called the third wave treatments, so dialectical behavior therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, which weave in mindfulness, all of these tools are so important, and they set the stage for a transpersonal experience, which at least was what was the
Okay.
case for me personally.
Yeah. Amazing. So how did, that meeting with Alan kind of open up? I mean, because you're involved with a lot of interesting people now.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Alan Steinfeld personally or don't know of him, he is an absolute pioneer in the field of consciousness. He has interviewed everybody on his show, New Realities. I mean, we're talking about Ram Dass. We're talking about David Hawkins, MD, PhD, who wrote Letting Go and Transcending Levels of Consciousness. Deepak Chopra. I think he's interviewed everybody. Amma, the hugging saint, who is amazing. And so many folks. So Alan has just been around really at the highest levels, talking to folks who are in the space, understanding consciousness and putting it out there for the masses to understand. And through Alan, I've met lovely, amazing people who have changed my life for the better, who have brought me further into alignment, who helped me to get my messages out there about breaking conditions for self-love in order to transcend into this more spiritual, synchronistic realm. And really mentoring me, actually. And in some ways, he seems like an unlikely mentor, because if you know about Alan, he's very interested in ETs and making contact. He has a book called Making Contact, and it seems really out there. But what I'll say is this: when you get people alone who have had experiences at higher states of consciousness, either in meditation, after meditations like myself, maybe folks who have been in psilocybin trials or have done ayahuasca with a shaman,
Or
this kind of thing.
experienced other beings or consciousness or
Or
dimensions. Just throwing that out
right.
there.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. What I think is the case is that you realize that what Carl Jung was saying about the collective consciousness is really very deeply true. And if you are connected in the collective consciousness, it's not just humans. It's not mushrooms or trees or dolphins even. It is every being everywhere. And that includes everything here on Earth and also not on Earth.
Yeah. And I mean, everything is frequency. So there is a frequency of the third dimension, which is why we have this physical body. And we're actually an organized energy field that's holding 50 trillion cells together in our name. But at different frequencies, it exists different levels of consciousness, different beings, all that stuff. I think that the awakening of consciousness is the awakening to these greater possibilities. And, I'm always asking for help from whoever, like my literary agent who passed away or my parents. And I always get very clear, very loud signs. And it's like, I think a lot of people are afraid to reach past that veil because they're like, what if nothing's there? But you have to have a heart openness to this possibility, because if you're not in that space, then there is no possibility. You're living in limitation. So, I mean, I don't know. I try to live in magic because it's a hell of a lot more interesting when you're living that way. And I know you get that now. The
Yes.
atheist Tara did not get that, but
No, I didn't get it. And the thing was is I felt like things were good enough. I was by all measures of outward success, I was doing okay. I had some measure of academic success. I was living in a stable place, all of these things that I thought would make me happy. And I thought I'm fine until I hit rock bottom. And there really is a gift in desperation, right? I
that
was
is
desperate.
very good to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I was desperate. I was rock bottom. I was miserable. And in that moment, when you have nothing else to lose, you're like, why not? Why not try to reach out for help? There are no atheists in a foxhole for a reason.
My dad always said that. He was in World War II, third day in Normandy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because when you're in that, wow, by the way, yeah,
Yeah.
that when you're in that state, right, you reach out. And what's wild is that there is something there. And there's not just something there, there's everything there.
Yeah.
Everything. The cosmos, the unified field of consciousness, everything is there. And when you know that everything is there, you're okay. I mean, when I was in that moment and thinking I'm going to die, I was okay. I was okay because I know from experience what the unified field is.
Yeah. I actually thought I was going to die in a tsunami on Sri Lanka. That's a whole other story. But I had that same feeling of like, I was like, holy shit, man, I just had the best year of my life and this is how it's going to go. And moved through all of this stuff really fast. And I was like, all right, I mean, there's nothing I can do. I surrender. But I would say what was your mission statement or goal from the old Tara to who you are now?
Mm. What I would say is when I was in that space where I was atheist and fear-based, I just wanted to survive. I just wanted to get out in front of the fear. And my mission then was to stop drowning in the misery. But I didn't realize that not only could I stop drowning, I could essentially be not even swimming, not even surfing. Like I could be on a mega yacht with all the coolest people. You know what I mean? Like I was out there drowning alone in the ocean, and now I'm in the kind of community equivalent of like having the best time out on the ocean with safety, security, community, and tools to navigate together being on the ocean. Right. So that like where we are now, and I'm saying we, because you and I are in it together on that yacht. Right?
Yeah.
It's not an actual yacht,
It's good champagne.
Et cetera, et cetera. But like, a metaphorical spiritual yacht out in the ocean, like we're there together. And I just could not have even conceived of this. So I wouldn't necessarily say even to try to shoot for it, because there's so much fear in the way, but I would say start small with letting go, radically letting go of all of the conditions you have for loving yourself and other people. If you can do that, and that is the one thing that you focus on.
Yeah. I mean, I would say a lot of people are operating from survival, and I've probably been operating it for I could say 3 decades, or I could say like the moment I realized my parents were my grandparents' age and my friends' grandparents were dying. I remember that moment so specifically. And I was just like, oh my God, like who's going to take care of me? But, at some point you move from survival to creation. And when you're in creation, you're actually in co-creation. So
yes.
You're not in survival, you're being supported by something greater. And the more you get into creation, the more those serendipities and synchronicities line up.
I used to keep track of all the synchronicities, and now it's like, it's just, yeah, it's like, okay, if it's, if the faucet's dripping, you can count the drops, right? But then, like, if you kick open a fire hydrant and it's like, you can't count the drops anymore.
Yeah.
So like in the beginning, it's good to kind of like have the breadcrumbs.
Because you're training your awareness to it. I used to do the same thing on my little desk calendar. I was like doing this abundance meditation every day. It would be like, if somebody bought me a cup of coffee, it's abundance. So you just track those things and then you start to see these breadcrumbs lining up. So how about now your mission statement or goal or purpose?
All right. This is the thing, Tim.
Lay it on me.
I have to articulate this. So we mentioned what happened in terms of the big stage shifts into different paradigms and further into the paradigms. What happened last year in May was that I entered into an extended state of bliss. So I had done these meditations for TCCHE for the course that I was filming. And normally I do the meditations of letting go of these conditions, for a half hour or maybe an hour tops every day. But because we were recording, we did the 4 different kinds of meditations that I do multiple times. And I was essentially meditating and leading the camera guy and the sound guy in the meditation for 8 hours. And after that, I entered into a state where I felt that everything was perfect and that I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to teach. I didn't need to make money. Because the world is perfectly set up for people to find their free will and decide to let go of conditions.
That's a state of wholeness, you could say.
State of complete wholeness. So speaking of Alan, so I was in this state for 3 days where I was laying in bed, not depressed, the opposite of depressed, in pure bliss, no drugs, nothing like that, just completely conditionless. And I had to teach a course on treating eating disorders in perinatal pregnant populations, which is a really important topic because it affects the baby if a person's not eating correctly, et cetera. So I thought, okay, I really need to get it together. Like, yes, everything is perfect, but also who's going to teach this course on perinatal eating disorder treatment if it's not me? What do I do? Actually, I taught it with Dr. Lawrence, so we're working together now. So he and I were teaching it together, but still, we needed to do it together. So I called Alan and I said, hey man, I've been in spiritual bliss for 3 days and I don't really know what to do. I got to get out of this. And he was like, Tara, people go to
Tara.
Yes, right. His accent. Yeah, Tara. He's
a New Yorker through and through.
Yeah. He's like, people go to an ashram for 20 years to, that kind of a thing, to try to get into a state of spiritual bliss. Enjoy it. Where do you have to go? Just enjoy it. Stay in the bliss. This kind of a thing.
That's great advice.
It is. Well, yeah, you would have thought, you would think I would take it too. I didn't, because I needed to get back, to doing things. And so, so what I did, and I'll get back to your question of what my mission is, but there's a whole, there's nuance to
Yeah.
So this is all the nuance and the story behind it. So I tried to actually get myself back in my ego so I can function. So I actually reprogrammed my mind to have a few more conditions just so I could be grounded. And so it made me a little sad, but it brought me back into my physical body. And then I was able to teach this course. And then I went back into the bliss state and I thought, okay, how do I integrate this without having to put conditions back in my mind to function? So I directed my consciousness to go back into my body and to embody this spiritual bliss, because there's one thing to practice the tools like we were talking about earlier. It's another thing to embody spirituality and spiritual bliss. These are two very, very different things and different paradigms. So I thought, okay, I need to embody this. And then I started embodying it more. It kind of went into my, we'll say cells, I guess. It just feels like my body is vibrating at a higher frequency. And I was better able to function. But it's hard because in one way, I have a mission to help people to let go of these conditions that they have for their self-love in order to grow. Maybe that is going into the spiritual paradigm. Maybe it's not. I don't really know. I'm not really looking at an outcome. All I know is that continually over time, over this lifetime, perhaps over many lifetimes, this lesson of letting go of conditions for self-love is quite powerful, and it will move the needle for anyone. And you can move the needle as far as you want to move it. And so I actually picked up David Hawkins' book, Transcending Levels of Consciousness, and I was reading. Great book, fabulous book. I recommend this book to everybody as a reference. I would say get it on Kindle if you can, or the hard copy, because you want to be able to look at the different chapters back and forth, almost like a spiritual dictionary, a state dictionary, spiritual state dictionary. So I looked at the bliss state, and it said in the book that when people reach the bliss state, they're like done. They don't really want to do anything. And I was like, oh yeah, like I would have. If I didn't get myself back in my body, I wouldn't have wanted to eat or look after my son or do anything, because I'm in bliss. Why do I need to eat? Or, like
why do I need to take care of this 5-year-old? He's an ascended master. He can do his own thing.
Yeah, he gets it, you know. So I thought, okay, I could give up like half the people do apparently, or I could do the harder thing, which is actually. So this is the kicker. This is the kicker, Tim. So you let go, not to get into the bliss state, but you let go, and the byproduct is you get into the bliss state. But then when you're in the bliss state, to go even further, you have to let go of the bliss state itself.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
In the nuts, huh?
I could go in so many directions, but we don't have time for that. But I will just say, like, it's one thing to go to the cave and get your enlightenment, but you're supposed to come back down the mountain and share it with other people, not in a preachy way, but just, really, really by embodying that knowledge and wisdom. But I want to leave you with one last question here. From where you sit right now, what would you tell your 17-year-old self?
I would tell my 17-year-old self, number one, that she is inherently perfect and inherently valuable, and she doesn't need to measure her worth in any way. That she doesn't have worth, whether she thinks she does or not. She doesn't have a lot of worth or a little worth. She transcends worth. She has inherent value, and that one day she'll learn to embody it.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, and everything's going to be just fine.
Or the red pen. Tara, that was so much fun. I have a feeling we're going to be doing more of these. A. B, where can people find you?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so speaking of inherent value, my website URL is now inherentlyvaluable.com, because that's the message. You are inherently valuable. You don't need to measure your worth. No conditions. So you can go to www.inherentlyvaluable.com. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me by searching my name, Tara Deliberto, PhD. And those are the two main places. And you can find all my work there. I created something called the Ego Personality Test, which is a way to assess where your ideals are. Do you have ego ideals like thinness, being a wealthy person? Are you keeping yourself trapped in the matrix? And to what extent are you living in accordance with higher consciousness ideals? And what you could do with that ego personality test is use it as a basis for what to program into your mind in meditation. You can program your mind with the ego personality test away from ego and transcend into higher consciousness.
I love it. I love it. This is going to be a great podcast. I feel like this is going to touch a lot of people. So thank you for sharing yourself, your wisdom, your stories. Folks, if you like this, sign up on YouTube and Spotify, follow, do whatever you're supposed to do. I don't even know because I used to not do it, but now I know it actually really makes a difference. But we have some really, I guess me, have some really fantastic guests coming up. And I look forward to having another conversation with you, Tara, and seeing how your path unfolds.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Likewise. This was so much fun. Let's do it again.
We definitely will. Thanks, folks, for listening to the Inciting Incident. Sign up, share it, all that jazz. Until next time.